The British royal family has long strived to present itself as a picture of perfection. From their lavish clothing and the places they visit to the people they associate with, everything is wrapped in a glittering veil that makes it all seem flawless. But in the end, that veil is just a veil. Once it's lifted, you'll find that the royals, like any other family, are dysfunctional, often with even deeper and more troubling issues. But this isn't all that surprising. The United Kingdom has operated under a monarchy for centuries, and the House of Windsor has held power since 1901. It's almost inevitable that a family with such immense wealth and influence would encounter serious problems. Understandably, most families would prefer to keep certain issues private. But for the royals, unfortunately, the public is especially fascinated by their personal lives. And no matter how wealthy they are, some things are nearly impossible to hide. If there's anything more powerful than money, it's secrets, and for the royal family, those secrets are nearly impossible to keep. In the early 20th century, people with disabilities, and their families, were often marginalized. Most families couldn't afford to hire full-time caregivers to look after their disabled relatives, but the royal family could. King George V, the grandfather of the late Queen Elizabeth II, and Queen Mary had 6 children. 2 of them went on to become British monarchs, Edward VIII and George VI, both well known to the public. But perhaps the least known of George V's children was his youngest son, Prince John. Prince John was born in 1905. By the age of 4, he was diagnosed with epilepsy and began showing signs of developmental disabilities. Some believe he may also have had autism or a learning disorder. Due to his condition, King George V barred him from participating in certain public events, such as the coronation ceremony, which was deemed too risky for his health. In addition, the royal family stopped sending Prince John to a formal school. Instead, the family arranged for a caregiver, Charlotte Lala Bill, to look after him. She lived with him at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, part of the Windsor family's private residence. Despite this, most people believe that the British royal family was concerned that any events involving Prince John might damage their reputation, and they thought it was inappropriate for him to appear in public. Over time, the young prince grew increasingly isolated. After the outbreak of World War I, he rarely saw his parents, as the king and queen were often away on official duties. He also seldom saw his siblings, who were either at boarding schools or serving in the military. Prince John gradually disappeared from the public eye, and no official portraits of him were made after 1913. Prince John died at the age of 13 from an epileptic seizure. After his death, Queen Mary wrote, "It was a terrible blow, but for that poor restless little soul, death was a great relief. I told George the news, and afterwards we drove to Wood Farm. We found poor Lala resigned but heartbroken. Little Johnny lay there, looking very peaceful." In recent years, Prince John's almost completely isolated life has been cited as evidence of the British royal family's coldness and cruelty. In reality, at that time, epilepsy was considered a mental illness, and those affected were often isolated from society. It wasn't until another 20 years later that people began to accept the idea that people with epilepsy should not be locked away. One author claimed that the royal family believed illnesses like epilepsy might run in their bloodline. At the time, it was still thought that royal blood was purer than that of commoners, so they wanted to conceal Prince John's condition as much as possible. Others argue that John was sent to Wood Farm to provide him with the best environment during the harsh conditions of World War I. One author stated that the royal family felt fear and shame about John's illness, while another said that John's life has often been portrayed as a tragedy or a conspiracy. When Edward VIII abdicated, some tried to discredit the succeeding King George VI by implying that he was prone to epileptic seizures like John. In 1998, after 2 volumes of family photographs were discovered, Prince John briefly became the focus of public attention. Queen Mary last mentioned Prince John in her diary by saying she missed this dear child very much. She gave the child's books to his close friend, inscribed with "In loving memory of our dear little prince." The young prince's caregiver, Lala, always kept his photo displayed on the mantelpiece. Beside it was a note he had written to her, "Nurse, I love you." The Romanov family was the last imperial dynasty of Russia, and their tragic downfall continues to evoke sorrow. What makes it even more heartbreaking is the thought that, had the European royal families intervened more decisively, the Romanovs might have been saved. Like many royals of the time, King George V of the United Kingdom was a first cousin of Russia's last Tsar, Nicholas II. Not only did they bear a striking physical resemblance, but they were also very close. In addition, George V was also a cousin of Tsarina Alexandra, Nicholas II's wife, which made the British king even more personally connected to the last imperial family of Russia. During the final years of Nicholas II's reign, Russia was undergoing immense political turmoil. Aware that their days on the throne were numbered, Nicholas II and Alexandra reached out to several of their royal relatives, including King George V, for help in escaping Russia. During the Russian Revolution, the major European powers, including Russia and the United Kingdom, were deeply involved in World War I. In 1917, the British government officially proposed offering asylum to the Tsar and his family, with plans to bring them from Russia to Britain. Initially, King George V agreed with the proposal, but he quickly backed down due to mounting public pressure at home. Britain was struggling through the war, and the nation was socially unstable, with growing resentment toward the monarchy and aristocracy. Some fears sheltering a recently overthrown autocratic Tsar might inflame socialist sentiment and even spark revolution in Britain. Ultimately, it was George V himself who pushed the British government to withdraw the offer of asylum to the Romanovs. After the Bolsheviks came to power, Nicholas II and his family were secretly executed in July 1918 at the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg. Other relatives of George V, such as his aunt, the Dowager Empress Maria Fyodorova, later managed to escape to Europe, but the Tsar's immediate family did not survive. Many historians have criticized George V as cold and pragmatic for abandoning family ties under political pressure. However, some argue that George was compelled to make this decision out of a sense of responsibility for Britain's stability. George V himself is said to have carried lifelong guilt over the matter, especially when he learned that his cousin's entire family, including the children, had been executed.